As we voyage, now moving our way to Cambodia, I want to share with you today the message of the Dalai Lama. My first quote, however, is not from the Dalai Lama, but I'd like for you to consider this as we voyage, as you continue on with your personal journeys of life. And the words are very simple. Enlightenment comes when the wave realizes it is also the ocean. We are one. The idea that we are separate, the concept of separateness, that you are different from me, that we are different from each other, is illusion. It doesn't exist. When we recognize that we are all one, when the wave recognizes it is indeed the ocean, this is the moment of enlightenment. When we recognize that what we do to someone else, we do to ourselves. That compassion practiced to another is compassion for ourselves. That kindness given to another is the kindness we give ourselves. And that the love we express to others is the love that we give ourselves. This, in essence, is the message of the Dalai Lama, that we are all one. There is no distinction between us. The world makes a damn good case for our separateness. We now watch hundreds of television shows, news programs, that tell us how different we are from each other. Most of us, when we were growing up, had 3 news channels to watch. We watched ABC, NBC, CBS in the United States. Now, you can watch one of hundreds of news programs that lets you feel as though the entire world agrees with exactly your opinion and how different everyone else is from you. If you don't like what someone else is saying, you can unfriend them quickly on social media. There's no more conversations with people who disagree with you, because doesn't it feel good to think that you're right? But how difficult is it when we know that we hear a single truth and we believe this truth with all of our heart and soul? How open are we to hearing other truths when our ears have already been filled with the singular truth that we believe that we alone possess? Today I challenge you, as you hear the words of the Dalai Lama, to think about how these words impact your life. How are you choosing to live? He's not just telling us what's possible. He's sharing with you a vision of a world that you can make for yourself, that we can make and build for each other. So let's get started talking about the Dalai Lama. His Holiness the Dalai Lama is the 14th reincarnation of the Dalai Lama. So here we're talking about a group of people who believe in reincarnation, and we are now at the 14th incarnation of the Dalai Lama. His name is Tenzin Gyatso, and he was born in 1935 in a small village in northeastern Tibet. Today, he is not just the spiritual leader of Tibetan Buddhism, but he's a global symbol for compassion, peace, kindness, and wisdom. How does someone get to be a global symbol for kindness, compassion, and wisdom? He started his journey at the age of 5. This calls to mind the opportunity that exists for all of us. People say, how is the Pope such a kind and good-hearted and loving man? I tell people because he doesn't have to make a living. He doesn't have a 9-to-5 job. He doesn't have to worry about who's going to prepare his meals, whether or not he can afford a car payment, doesn't have any children to send to college. These are the things that we embrace in our life that cause us anxiety. And so again, here we see this young boy as a child here, when he was recognized as the 14th reincarnation of the Dalai Lama. And since then, he has lived this beautiful life. Now, it hasn't always been beautiful. He's lived through great trials, exile, watching his people being murdered, his family. All of these things happen, and yet, because the expectation of him to be a leader was so strong, and to be good, and to be kind and compassionate was so strong, he fulfilled this prophecy that was set before him. And it speaks to us of the power of expectation. When we expect from ourselves great things, even when we fall short, we're falling short of greatness. But when we set our mind on mediocrity, falling short of mediocrity doesn't really cut it. So set your mind on great things. Clear the clutter from your life and find your way to becoming wise like the Dalai Lama. His early life was marked by rigorous training and education in Buddhist philosophy, and this would shape the way he sees the world. His life took a dramatic turn, one that he couldn't have expected, when the Chinese invaded Tibet in 1950. The country faced a threat to its autonomy, and they feared for his life. But he took on the role of leader and was a visionary even then, at the age of 16. Imagine a 16-year-old in any other place and time leading an entire nation of spiritual believers. In 1959, following a failed uprising against Chinese rule, the Dalai Lama fled to India, where he has lived ever since. He speaks today, and he continues to speak, even in his 80s, about the principles of compassion and nonviolence. This is one of his most enduring legacies to the world. It's his advocacy for compassion and nonviolence. You will hear the word compassion over and over again in his writing. The universal values of love and kindness and understanding, and that we are called to transcend cultural and religious boundaries. He has his faith, and his faith is a very unique faith. Tibetan Buddhism is a magical kind of faith. It has all sorts of demons and gods and very, very interesting mythology. But he says to all of us, even though we are different, let's consider how we are the same. Cultivating inner peace is important to him, and he believes that it is the key to resolving inner conflict. This, he says, you can apply to your life. How do we find inner peace? He believes in interfaith dialogue and science. So today, when many faiths would simply say, you don't need to know, all that you need to do is believe, he says, you should pay attention to the facts, listen to science, and to engage with other leaders around the world and to have real dialogue about faith. He's been a vocal advocate for interfaith dialogue and for science and spirituality. His engagement with leaders from various traditions underscores a commitment to fostering understanding and harmony in a world that's changing before our very eyes. The Dalai Lama is a staunch advocate for human rights, democracy, and the preservation of Tibetan culture. He believes in democracy. He speaks out for democracy. Even though he is the leader of Tibet, he's unable to return home because of Chinese rule. Despite the challenges faced by Tibetan people under Chinese rule, he maintains a commitment to nonviolence and to peaceful resolution through dialogue. He still wants to be able to return home and for all of his people to live in peace under Chinese rule. He believes also in environmental stewardship. He's witnessed in his lifetime how the world has changed. And he sees that we must be responsible for the planet and its decline. We must take responsibility and be stewards of the environment. I call again to one of the important things that's important for us who believe in the Judeo-Christian tradition. When we look back at the beginnings of Genesis and we see in the Bible where it says, "And God gave mankind dominion over the land and the creatures that walked the earth." That word actually isn't dominion. It was a mistranslation. The word originally is closer to stewardship. Think about the harm that has been done by that misunderstanding alone. When we believe that we are dominant and we have dominion, how do we abuse? How do we live? And yet, when we're called to be stewards, isn't that something entirely different? How does that change the way we see our responsibility when we are stewards for the planet and stewards for the animals and stewards for all of life? And this is what the Dalai Lama's belief is. He highlights the need for a holistic approach to address global challenges, including climate change. And he wants us all to have a sense of well-being and compassion and understanding and stewardship for the planet. His influence today is worldwide, spreads far beyond Tibet and his believers. He's a source of inspiration for millions. He talks about the importance of harmony and being peaceful in a world marked by conflict. He's not unaware of what's happening in the world. He's very much aware. And he speaks out still today for nonviolence. The quotes that I'm going to share with you are not just a collection of wisdom, but a guide to living a meaningful and compassionate life. It's going to be a lot. There's a lot of words coming up for you, right? They're words. Find something in these words that you can settle on, that you can rest on, that you can welcome into your hearts, and let it find a place there. As the Buddha would say, we welcome both the good and the bad into our lives, and we let them wash over us. They stay for a bit, and then we let them go, because all things are transient in our lives, temporal. But I hope that there's something in here that you can hold on to and take home. Grounded in his teachings on love, kindness, and altruism, the quotes that I'm going to share with you transcend cultural and religious boundaries. One of his great quotes is on happiness. And one of the most beautiful things about the Dalai Lama is he takes something as mesmerizing, as difficult as some of us make happiness, and he makes it so simple. He says the purpose of our lives is to be happy. How many of us have heard that as children? We don't. Most of us grew up with a very different idea of what our purposes were. We come up with the idea of our purpose being to give, to do, to produce, to become, to be. And he says all of that's fine, but our purpose is to be happy. And now the question is, how do we find happiness? And the Dalai Lama says you don't find happiness. You choose it. You become it. You embody happiness. And in so being, we share happiness. And so our choice to be happy becomes a gift to us and to everyone who comes in contact with us. The pursuit of happiness is a fundamental goal. Even the founding fathers of the United States of America understood this. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Those are intrinsic to who we are as human beings, and the American Republic believes that it was intrinsic to the foundation of our moral republic. He invites us to consider the essence of our existence and the importance of cultivating inner joy and contentment. Happiness is not something ready-made. It comes from your own actions. So it's not something that we can go out and find. There isn't a store that sells happiness. There's not a person who's going to bring you happiness. It's something that we choose. And it's something that we choose to give and to share. But it comes from us. The notion of happiness is not a passive one. You have to make a conscious decision to live and to act in accordance with happiness, to actively choose it, to be it. He invites us to take responsibility for our well-being and to recognize the agency we have in shaping our lives. This is a fundamental difference between Buddhism and many of the other religious faiths. In many faiths, we are taught that there's something that comes later, that if we sacrifice today and do today, that there is something better coming tomorrow after we die. Buddhism tells you there is nothing but now. There only ever was and ever will be now, this moment. And our happiness comes from living and embracing and choosing happiness in every moment. And when we choose happiness in this moment and in every moment that follows, we create for ourselves heaven, is it not? And our responsibility is choosing for ourselves to live that way. There's not something that's going to come. This isn't a can that we kick down the road, hoping that sometime later on in our life something good is going to happen for us. No, it's right now is all there ever is. If you want others to be happy, he says, practice compassion. And if you want to be happy, practice compassion. Here we see that compassion is the rule for happiness. That when we are compassionate, we give to ourselves in equal measure to others. Compassion is reciprocal in its nature. By promoting the well-being of others, we in turn contribute to our own happiness. And really, this is about intention. From intention springs all. This isn't about doing something. This is about being something. When you're happy, don't you share happiness? When you're angry, is it possible to share happiness? So we must first choose to be happy. We must choose first to be compassionate. And in doing that, we share it with others. There's an interconnectedness to human experience, and that altruism is connected to our personal fulfillment. And here again, we get into some, even within the Christian community, we hear those who talk about faith alone will save you. Faith and belief in Jesus Christ will save you. And others will say, well, if you believe, doesn't it require actions? Well, here the Dalai Lama would say to you that if you truly believe, wouldn't you be moved to action anyways? Shouldn't we be able to tell your faith by your actions? The ultimate source of happiness is not money and power, but warm-heartedness. He doesn't even talk or often use the word love. He calls it warm-heartedness. This is compassion. This is love for another. And love for another, is that not compassion? He challenges the conventional notions of happiness linked to external factors. Most of us find happiness through success, wealth, having someone in our lives, watching our children grow up, seeing all of these things, having all of these things, doing all of these things. He emphasizes that genuine and lasting happiness is rooted in warm-heartedness, love. The quality of our relationships and the compassion we extend to others contributes to our well-being. Kindness, very simple, easy to say. The Dalai Lama encourages us to make kindness a constant practice. And how do we make kindness a constant practice? Must we not first be kind? Through the words, Dalai Lama invites us to cultivate a word where kindness is not just an act, but a way of life. When we are kind, we will be kind. When we are loving, when we are love, we will be loving. Be kind whenever possible. And then he says, it's always possible. How simple. By asserting that kindness is always possible, he says that we should incorporate this into our daily mindset. And it's easy to be kind when the world is good. We feel this ourselves. When everything is going well for us, how easy it is to be kind. But the true test of our character is to be kind when the world is unkind. How do we respond? His religion is very simple. He says, my religion is kindness. His entire philosophy boils down into a single word, which is kindness. He communicates the universal and accessible nature, and that it transcends religious boundaries. Many of us believe that religion came first and directed our morality. I encourage you to consider the reverse, the converse notion, that morality is what guides religion, or should. It is what created the notion of religion, and that religion is really about taking a personal faith, coalescing it into governance. But that true religion, true morality, transcends religious boundaries. This is my simple religion, he says. No need for temples, no need for complicated philosophy. Your own mind, your own heart is the temple. Your philosophy is simple kindness. The true essence of religious or philosophical practice lies in the daily expression of kindness, and that we can embody it in every day of our life. He would say, be kind to all creatures. This is the true religion. The Dalai Lama extends the scope of kindness beyond human interactions to all things. They say now that one of the greatest indicators of whether or not a person is going to be a serial killer or a murderer is how that child treats animals as a child. And we see that when people are brought up with kindness, they live in kindness. They are kind to all creatures, to all animals. So there's an interconnectedness that extends to the entire web of life. And this is another interesting piece of Buddhism, that there isn't a distinction between humans and animals and insects and plants, that there's a level of consciousness that connects all of us, but that those at the top of the web are responsible for the well-being of those who lie below. Love and compassion are necessities, not luxuries. Without them, humanity cannot survive, says the Dalai Lama. So, love and compassion are vital for the flourishing of humanity itself. When we feel love and kindness towards others, it's not only makes others feel loved and cared for, but it also helps us develop inner happiness and peace. By being kind, it puts us at peace. And keep in mind here that we can only be kind when we have been shown kindness. How do we know how to be kind? And so it's our responsibility to teach kindness. And as we all know, for those of you who are parents, our children don't listen to a damn thing we say, but they watch everything we do. So if you want kind children, don't tell them about kindness. Be kind. There is a reciprocal relationship between expressing kindness and experiencing well-being. By being kind, we create love in our hearts. We become happier. And love, the hard one. Love is a force that transcends individual happiness and underpins our interconnected existence. And it's the guiding principle for a meaningful and compassionate life. Living without love, what's the point, right? His teachings inspire us to cultivate a world where love is not just a sentiment, but a transformative and an active force for positive change. What he's saying to us is, if you love, let it not be a word. Love is an easy word to say. It trips off of our tongues, doesn't it, today? I love you. But love comes with responsibility. We can't say that we love someone and then take no responsibility for that person. Love means getting your hands dirty. It means getting involved and taking charge of that person's life, being responsible for how that person lives. So when we say that we love someone, when we say that we love something, it means that we have to be involved. There's an interconnectedness when we use that word. It's not just a word. The more you are motivated by love, the more fearless and free your action will be. Think back to the first time that you were in love. Have you ever been more stupid in your entire life? Right? That's what love does. And yet over time we lose that, don't we? We lose that feeling of love. And the Dalai Lama says you cultivate it every day. It's a beautiful thing to be in love, to feel that love, to feel that responsibility that you can't breathe unless you're with that other person. And to continue to cultivate that in your life, not just for that one person, but for everything, to be in love with life itself. Love not only motivates positive action, but also liberates individuals from fear and constraints. We're not afraid when we're in love. We should be, but we're not. It aligns with his advocacy for nonviolence and profound impact of cultivating a loving and compassionate heart. Love is the absence of judgment. When we judge, we're really confessing. So says Nikola Tesla. Judgment really is a reflection of our own fears, of our own misdoings and misgivings. And that true love is the absence of judgment. It means that there are no conditions. When we say that we love someone, we often attach conditions. Almost every type of love has conditions. Even parents at some point attach conditions to love. It's the purest form of love, though, to love without condition, and it's the most difficult. True love and compassion, says the Dalai Lama, are not just feelings, but actions that transform others and oneself. Love is transformative, and it gives to both the giver and the recipient. And we should be encouraged to love in both deeds and in our interactions. He says, give the ones you love wings to fly, roots to come back, and reasons to stay. I love that one. Love fosters independence. And for those of you who are pressuring your children to have grandchildren, ask yourself the question, why? Is it for them or is it for you? True love supports those that we care about. It says, I see you. I know you. I want you to find your happiness. And sometimes that means it doesn't include you. And that's okay. We still want them to find their happiness. Love in this context is not possessive, but empowering. That we can grow and allow others to grow. That we can love and allow others to love. That we can be free and allow others to find their freedom, even if it doesn't include you for a time. The more you nurture a feeling of loving kindness, the happier and calmer you will be, says the Dalai Lama. Loving kindness is a pathway to personal well-being. It contributes to inner peace and to happiness. And we have to actively cultivate those in our lives. When we practice loving kindness and compassion, we are the first ones to profit. So he says, you're going to do these things for others, But the first thing, in order to give it, must we not possess it first? How can we give away something that we don't already possess? And so in giving it away, don't we also recognize that we have it? And so in recognizing that, aren't we the first ones to benefit? There is a reciprocal nature to practicing love and compassion, that while others benefit, it's really you in the end. And so this is one of the great philosophies. Is there any truly selfless act? That when we give, we recognize that in giving, we receive perhaps more than the person we are giving to. And when we recognize that, no act is ever selfless. Because even when we're giving to someone else, we recognize that we're receiving more in return, making it a truly selfish act. Right? No answers here, folks. If you came for answers, this is the wrong lecture. Yeah, these lectures only allow you to ask better questions, I'm afraid. Anger. Anger is one of the great, powerful, debilitating forces in our world. And he asks us to be careful with anger. Because inasmuch as we welcome love and kindness and compassion in our lives, when we allow anger to come in, anger burns with a fire perhaps even brighter than these others. And it can burn and destroy everything that you've built with kindness and love and compassion as quickly as the flame has sparked. Anger or hatred is like a fisherman's hook, he says. It's very important to ensure that we are not caught by it. Cultivating love, he says, is the antidote to destructive emotions. Anger is the ultimate destroyer of your own peace of mind. By labeling anger as the ultimate destroyer, he shows how anger is a choice, and a choice to destroy our own personal well-being. Holding on to anger harms not only relationship, but undermines our own mental peace. Stay in anger for a while. You know what it does. We've all chosen anger for a period, and we've watched ourselves slip into thoughts that are no longer safe. They're no longer reasonable. Nothing, not even the most beautiful things in our lives, can be perceived as beautiful when they're overshadowed by anger. And we've all seen that. We understand its power, and he recognizes it as well. Anger and hatred are signs of weakness, while compassion is a sure sign of strength. Here, the Dalai Lama calls an important distinction. In today's world, many of us think that when someone is angry, that's powerful. He says the angry man is the one who's lost all control. Anger and getting loud is our last attempt to establish control when we are most assuredly out of it. Instead, be kind, be compassionate, be measured in your words. Mean what you say what you mean. Take some time to think about it if you need to, but don't say anything out of anger. And truly, when someone is merciful, mercy can only come from a place of strength. A weak person can never be merciful because there's no one to be merciful to. Only a powerful person can show mercy. True strength lies in the ability to cultivate compassion, forgiveness, even in the face of challenges. And he says, anger cannot be overcome by anger. If someone is angry with you and you show anger in return, the result is a disaster. On the other hand, if you control your anger and show its opposite, love, compassion, tolerance, and patience, not only will you remain peaceful, but the other person's anger will also diminish. In St. Paul's letters, he says, when you are meeting with someone who is angry with you, someone who opposes you, be kind to them. Show them love. And in doing so, remember this is one of my favorite phrases from Paul's letter. He says, and in doing so, it's like heaping coals upon their head. Strange way. But what he's really saying, if you want to make someone really angry, be kind to them, right? And you know this to be true. When we're angry with someone and they're angry back with it, boy, we're just justified. But man, doesn't it just burn us when someone is kind to us when we're angry with them, right? The Dalai Lama takes a different approach. He says, be kind because being kind creates kindness. Be loving because it creates love in return. And when we are consistently kind and loving, we create and we teach the ways to compassion. The Dalai Lama advocates for breaking the cycle of anger through non-reactivity and responding with qualities like love and compassion, tolerance and patience. Most of us get angry, and we get angry quickly. And then what follows is regret. He said, take a moment or two. Non-reactivity. It's okay to say nothing sometimes. When you see a post on Facebook, you don't have to respond immediately. You're not the morality police. You can just scroll past. That is an option, right? When you walk past a conversation that you don't like the sound of, you don't have to jump in. Matter of fact, you don't even have to think about it. You can walk right past it. By choosing to be non-reactive, we choose control over our own emotions. This approach preserves our inner peace, and it de-escalates conflicts. The quickest way to put out a fire is what? Take away the fuel. It's not water. It's taking away the fuel. And that's what we need to choose in our lives to de-escalate anger. He says, people easily forget kindness, but remember the harm caused by anger. So true. He encourages us to be mindful of the consequences. This is not only about saying how even a lifetime of being kind to someone can be undone by a moment of anger, but we know this is true in our own lives when we think back to the people who have done wonderful things for us, but we're often called to remind ourselves of the one time that they harmed us, and that lingers in our minds far longer. The true hero, he says, is one who conquers his own anger and hatred. Not only the hero to others, but the hero in your own life as well. Conquering our anger and hatred requires a level of self-discipline and courage that surpasses conventional notions of heroism. We look to those who are heroes in our lives. Aren't those the ones who recognized that was what was required of them and rose to the occasion? They were selfless, not selfish. Altruism, speaking of selflessness. Our prime purpose in this life is to help others. And if you can't help them, at least don't hurt them. Going back to the Hippocratic Oath, do no harm. But our goal should be to help others. Altruism is the underpinning of the Dalai Lama's philosophy that when you believe with love and kindness and compassion, we're called to act on it, to do good things for others, to be good things for others, and at the very least, to do no harm to others. And so as we go about living our days, he says, ask yourself these basic questions. What am I doing today to help someone else? And if I can't help someone else today, at least, at the very least, make sure that you're not causing harm. Whether one is rich or poor, educated or illiterate, religious or non-believing, man or woman, black, white or brown, the Dalai Lama says we are all the same. Physically, emotionally, and mentally, we are all equal, or at least we start out that way. We all share basic needs for food, shelter, safety, and love. We all aspire to happiness, and we all shun suffering. When we recognize these basic things, that we're all the same, what else should possibly get in the way to separate us. We are all the same, regardless of external differences. And this is what underpins our desire for altruism. That because we are the same, what I am doing for you, I'm also doing for myself. Perspective. How do we gain perspective? It's very rare or almost impossible that an event can be negative from all points of view, says the Dalai Lama. I love this one. Because if you perceive something as negative, it's probably just the position you're standing in right now. Change your position, and you will almost always change your perspective. And isn't this why we travel? You could stay at home and watch television and see someone else's perspective. But the reason that we travel is to see for ourselves, with our own eyes, this beautiful world and its people. And to see the world from a different perspective, to see the world through someone else's eyes. We should consider the multifaceted nature of events and challenges, recognizing that even in difficult situations, there's opportunities for growth, learning, and positive outcomes, even in the most difficult of circumstances. And he says, choose to be optimistic. It just feels better, right? I mean, this is what I love. They're so simple, right? Choose to be optimistic. You can choose to be anything. Why not be optimistic? What harm is there in hope? Really, what harm is there? Be optimistic. It feels better. Optimism is not a passive outlook, but an active decision that can influence our well-being. It's not just about being hopeful or optimistic and then doing nothing. It's about living optimistically, being optimistic in one's words, being kind and compassionate in one's actions. See the positive, he says, the potential, and make an effort. When we see the potential, we must make an effort. Again, actions are important. We need to shift our perspective. Our mindset plays a crucial role in shaping our experiences. It's a great story called The Cockroach that talks about perspective. Some of you may be familiar with the story of the cockroach. But imagine yourself at a restaurant. Beautiful, 5-star restaurant. Everyone's enjoying their meals. And all of a sudden, a woman starts screaming at the top of her lungs because there's a cockroach on her sweater. And she stands up and she's flailing about, and her bowl of soup flips over. Everyone at the table is now full of her meal. And the cockroach is still there, and she flings this cockroach, and it flies all the way across the room. And it lands on another woman. And she gets up. And her food now is all over. She flings that table like this, and everything is a mess. And they're chasing around, and someone kicks that cockroach, and it flies clear across the room and lands on the lapel of the waiter. The waiter looks down, picks the cockroach up, opens the door, sets the cockroach outside, and closes the door. Who was the problem? The cockroach or the people in the restaurant? It's not the cockroach that's the problem. It's how we perceive the cockroach. All of you have a chance to see things, and we see the same thing. It's how we perceive them. The key is to shift your perspective, and particularly now as we approach election season in the United States. I share this because it's important to see perspective. We all fill our ears with what is a specific truth, unwilling to hear the other side of a truth. And if you're unwilling to listen to the other side of the argument, then shut up. But if you want to learn, be willing to learn. Be willing to admit that you might be wrong on something. And when we are willing to listen and learn, we open our ears to the possibility of a new truth, of a new perspective. But when our eyes and our ears and our hearts and our minds have been filled with a singular truth that we are unwilling to let go of and unwilling to change, how are we any different than anyone else? So never enter into an argument or to a discussion unless you first are willing to change your perspective. This comes first with transparency, though. We must be transparent, because a lack of transparency results in a distrust and a deep sense of insecurity. We need transparency. We need to be accountable for transparency. And how do we do that? First of all, it means telling the truth. Recognize what is true and the difference between what is true and what we think is true. Very different. We misalign those. We think that they're the same, but there's a world of difference between what is true and what we think is true. He talks about peace. We can never obtain peace in the outer world until we make peace with ourselves. Again, this idea of we cannot give what we do not possess. By advocating for inner peace, he implies that cultivating a positive and calm internal perspective is a prerequisite for creating a peaceful world. The world that we live in is our fault. It's that simple. For better or for worse, it is our creating. If we want a better world, we must make it first within ourselves and then reflect that to those around us. Look at situations from all angles and you will become more open. I love this visual. But look at what he's carrying. He's carrying a piece of luggage. We all carry this baggage. We carry this baggage, and sometimes it's the only thing that defines us. Sometimes we need to be willing to set down the baggage to be able to move and to live and to be. We're often defined by this baggage. And oftentimes it's not even our own baggage. It's the baggage that someone else brought to our lives, set down at our doorstep, and then we picked up. One of the great messages is that we can set down this baggage. The baggage doesn't define us. And so to look at situations from all angles and become more open, to let go of this baggage that we carry in our minds, this preconceived notions. And again, I share with you, this is why we travel, to see things differently. Nuanced views lead to empathy and tolerance. That when we see things from another person's perspective, we see that person perhaps for the first time. We can't know a person until we know how they see the world. And so, what a wonderful opportunity it is to travel with people and to hear different perspectives and to learn and to be challenged and to welcome those challenges. In the practice of tolerance, one's enemy is the best teacher. What do we learn from people who agree with us? Nothing. Stay at home and look in the mirror. Really, why bother to go out and talk to people if you want to have and to hear the exact same perception of everything? Challenge yourself. Welcome people who hold differing views, and this is how we learn. Adversity. Remember that not getting what you want is sometimes a wonderful stroke of luck. I would bet that almost all of us can look back at the things that we used to pray for and now be grateful that we didn't receive half of them. And we don't know. But again, it's perspective. And when we welcome adversity into our life as a great teacher, we welcome it, we let it pass because everything is fleeting, but we welcome it in the same way that we welcome good into our lives. Adversity encourages resilience. As a business person, and for those of you who are business people, but even in your professional careers, what do we learn from success? Not a damn thing. The only thing we really learn is from our failures, from our adversity. Those are the great lessons in life. Compassion. Whether one believes in a religion or not, the Dalai Lama says, and whether one believes in rebirth or not, there isn't anyone who doesn't appreciate kindness and compassion. It reinforces that compassion is a unifying principle. Compassion naturally creates a positive atmosphere, and as a result, you feel peaceful and content. It has a ripple effect, sending these ripples out to everyone that you meet. In closing, the Dalai Lama's teachings of inner peace, compassion, and kindness are central themes of his philosophy. His life and teachings are a guide for how we can live our lives. He challenges us to say we can all live differently. And my closing thought today is a funny one. The Dalai Lama walks into a pizza shop and the guy behind the counter asks, "What can I get you?" And the Dalai Lama says, "Make me one with everything." And with that, I leave you. Thank you all for your time and attention.